This is episode number 8 of DTY Talks, and today we're talking to Molly Malarkey, founder of From Mat to Table, a unique yoga and food experience that helps you implement mindfulness in every area of your life, from the yoga mat to the dinner table. Thank you, Molly, for joining us with DTY Talks, and I really do thank you for taking the time out to join us for Dr. Stu Talks. So what we're going to do for the next, however long it lasts, is we're just going to chat. We're going to talk about what you do. We're going to talk about you and how our patients and audience and everyone who follows us can benefit from what you do, because what you do, we believe, is a benefit to the community. So let's just jump right into it. You ready?
I'm ready. I'm psyched. I'm so excited to talk to you guys about yoga.
Okay, cool. So let's just start off with From Mat to Table. I checked out this really cool website, and we're going to get into it later, from mattotable.com. So I want to get on that first. Tell us about From Mat to Table and how you came up with this idea.
Sure. So I am originally from Ellicott City, Maryland, and I did my yoga teacher training at Go-Go Guru, which used to be a yoga studio on Main Street. And my cousin Carly and I are very close, and we would religiously do the Monday night yoga class that was offered there. And we didn't know this at the time, but the last class that we took there prior to the flood, I don't know if anyone heard about or read about or saw in the news, maybe the flood that happened roughly a year ago in Ellicott City. But, you know, we were on the way home from yoga together, and we were just having a conversation in the car about purpose. And so outside of being a yoga instructor, I have a full-time job doing clinical research outside of, you know, her culinary interest. She has a full-time job in pharmaceuticals. And so we were just talking about purpose and what we were passionate about. And she just said, you know, what are you passionate about? What do you think one of your purposes here is? And I said, yoga. Like, I love yoga. I love teaching. I love taking classes. What about you? And she said, food. Like, everybody always says yoga every day, but Carly was like, food every day. And so we were like, okay, well, let's find a way to kind of marry our passions, yoga and food. And so, you know, we thought about what are we going to call it, and we threw some funny names back and forth at each other, one of which was Marinate and Meditate. And then, you know, I was like, what is how, cool. You know, like farm to table, you know, how all the local businesses are like farm to table. What if we did From Mat to Table? And so that kind of birthed our small business. And so what it is you come, we do about an hour of yoga, and then Carly does a quick cooking demonstration, and then we eat a family-style meal. And so what it's really about is, you know, we cook with the seasons, so we do everything that's in season and fresh, kind of like how Ayurveda medicine teaches you to eat. And we try to marry the theme of the yoga and the food. So we're coming on our year anniversary now. We did our first event last October, and for that event, just for an example, we did October roots, and so we did all root vegetables, and then my yoga practice was centered around the root chakra.
Interesting. I want to get into that a little later, because I'm going to ask about yoga and kind of stick with that for the first part, and then I want to jump into the food aspect, because I did get a note that you are, you know, into the food, and of course you just mentioned that as well with your partner. What can we expect during an experience at From Mat to Table? Is it beginner friendly?
It's beginner friendly, yes. We try and cater everything to all levels welcome. So it doesn't matter if you've never done yoga, it doesn't matter if you've done it every single day since you were 17. Yeah, we open our doors to anyone.
Oh, cool. But what can we expect? I mean, when we walk in, what is the experience like from beginning to end?
Sure.
How long is
so
it?
You come. Yeah, absolutely. So every event lasts about 3 hours. So you come in, and we do like a 15 to 20-minute mingling. Some of the people that come to these events know each other, some don't. So we like to just do like a short introduction, because it is an intimate experience. We try to have about anywhere from 8 people tops. And then we get right on our mats and do about an hour and 15 yoga practice centered around the themes. And then after that, after you gracefully come out of your shavasana, you literally flow from mat to table. So then Carly does a little quick food demo with everything that she prepared for you tonight. And then, of course, you sit down and then we have a family-style meal.
Wow. So it's really community-oriented. I like that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what we were going for.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, some of the better and more successful forms of, even with exercising, when you do it in a community setting, it kind of has some accountability. It just kind of, it encourages people. So I think kind of fusing the fitness with the food and then all of that is really awesome. And I think that you probably see a lot of people who are, I'm not sure, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like the kind of thing that would grow pretty quickly, just with people talking about it, word of mouth.
Word of mouth, yeah, and that's pretty much how we have grown. I mean, of course, we have, social media accounts, but you're completely right, and I completely agree with you. There is a different energy in the room when you're doing a yoga practice with like 20 to 30 people. It definitely motivates you to really flow and get into it versus, if you were doing it by yourself at home in like your living room or something like that.
So speaking of yoga, it's one of those things that, we hear a lot about, and if you're not into it, it can be one of those things on the, on the outside of life. It's something you hear about but don't know anything about. Why should people get into yoga? Why do you believe that it's something that more people who are not doing it probably should look into it? Who's it for?
Who's it for? That's a great question, and I completely agree with you. I think yoga, especially in social media in today's day and age, is exploding. You can't go on Facebook or Instagram and not see someone in, like a beautiful handstand in front of a beautiful landscape, or someone in like scorpion pose in front of a sunset or something like that. So I can definitely see where you're coming from in that aspect. But to answer your question, who can do it? Anyone can do it. I've had birthday parties that I've hosted for children as young as 6 years old, and then I have women that regularly take my weekly class that are as old as, like 75. So anyone can do yoga, and there's definitely yoga classes out there that are catered to all sorts of populations. So definitely don't let what you see out there on the media influence you or deter you away from getting on the mat.
And it obviously has the physical, because when you see people doing it, we see people of all sizes. As a matter of fact, if you go on Instagram, I'm always on there, and I see so many people of all sizes, all shapes and sizes, who can do it, all races, everyone is doing it. It's not, designated for one group of people. In your estimation, how is it beneficial? I mean, when you think about the spiritual, the physical, and it even beyond that, how is it beneficial?
That is a great question. There's so many benefits to yoga. I mean, if somebody has anything from diabetes to high blood pressure to high cholesterol to heart disease, yoga can certainly help with all of those things and so much more. It increases flexibility, it increases strength, it balances your metabolism. If somebody's looking to lose weight, it's certainly something to ease your way into, maybe before trying, high resistance workouts or cardio. It's good for even preventative injury. So a lot of athletes will do yoga that's catered specifically toward injury prevention. And to go along with what you were saying with the spiritual practice, the root of yoga and how it actually evolved was a spiritual practice to train the body and the mind to become self-observant. And I think in every culture, you're going to find a different spin off of it. Even just from my experiences here in the U.S., there is a different yoga practice here on the East Coast even compared to on the West Coast. And there's so many different types out there. There's Ashtanga, there's Vinyasa, there's Bikram. There's so many different kinds that if somebody was just getting into it, I would just encourage them, just try a bunch of different styles, try a bunch of different teachers, and you're eventually going to find one that you really resonate with, or you might even find an instructor that you resonate with, and then you can just take it from there.
And how do they differ? I mean, I know that's probably a loaded question.
Okay.
It's probably kind of hard to explain, but just if you can, how do they differ?
Sure.
style-wise?
So there are so many different types. So Bikram, for example, is a 90-minute class, and it's traditionally in a hot room, and it's the same set of 26 postures. So if you're looking for a hot power flow, if you're looking for something like that, and you like the routine, that would be a practice that might be good for you. I'm personally a Vinyasa certified instructor, and what Vinyasa means is you are linking the breath to the movement. So you would do a movement into a pose, which is your asana, the posture, and you would link the breath with it. So you would inhale, come into the pose, exhale, flow to the next. And so Vinyasa is definitely a little bit of a slower practice. It's a good option for someone who is a beginner and is looking to just start. But I mean, I'm just one instructor. There's so many instructors out there. If you asked me this question, somebody else that might be an Ashtanga teacher might give you a completely different answer. So yeah, if you're looking at a yoga schedule for the first time, just pick whatever class is listed as beginner, and you'll be fine. And then eventually, yeah, you will advance into intermediate or every studio labels it differently. Sometimes there's level 2, level 3, you know.
I've read that you have experience with PTSD, and how do you think that yoga can help with PTSD?
Sure, that's a great question. So I did a teacher training through mindful yoga therapy, and it was specifically geared toward yoga for veterans who had just gotten back from their service that were suffering through PTSD. And a lot of what I extracted out of that training was within the PTSD practice, it's a lot slower. It's a different sequence, and it focuses a lot on breath work and presence and becoming the observer. And another interesting thing that I took away from that training was there's no assist or no touching someone with PTSD. A lot of times during a yoga class, I might cue my students to close their eyes and just, become observant of their body and just kind of lose track of their day or lose track of the room. But obviously, as an instructor, you don't want to physically assist someone into a pose or even touch them throughout their practice if you were gearing it toward that specific population, because you never know what somebody's trigger might be. And then going along with that, you don't know if you're going to physically trigger someone by touching them, but then you also have to be careful about your word choice and the words that you use. So you wouldn't want to say something like ground down, which is something that's, used quite frequently in, your normal vinyasa class or something like that. But when you're working with that specific population, you do kind of want to stick to not necessarily a certain script, but you just want to be mindful of the cues and the instructions that you're using to get that population through the flow.
And I'm not sure if you went into this, but how is it specifically for those with and I just mentioned PTSD. Someone may be listening and like, what are they talking about? I can't just assume they know. It's post-traumatic stress syndrome, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yep. Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to be sure because sometimes we mention words and we just assume everyone knows.
Yeah, it's all good.
And it is something that, and I'm just speaking off the top of my head, I'm not as educated with this, but it is something that, as you mentioned, veterans and even everyday people can experience PTSD just from, maybe past experiences growing up. They may have gone through something that it's post-traumatic. They're not currently going through the traumatic experience, but it's afterward, and it's what they're going through and how they're dealing with it or trying to deal with it now, something that's no longer happening. And yoga, as you mentioned, can be very beneficial to handling those problems. Or is it handling? I'm trying to use my words carefully. Would they be handling it or managing, maybe a better word for it?
Yeah, I love that you just use the word managing. Managing and or coping, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So why do you think that yoga is good for that? That may be another loaded question simply because it just would be your estimation. Someone going through it might say, well, it's beneficial in a different way for me, or it helps me manage it in a different way. But just in your experience, have you ever spoken with someone and they told you why the yoga was helpful to them?
Sure, absolutely. So at least what I've extracted from people that fall within that population who have practiced yoga since they've gotten back or, since they've had a traumatic experience. from what I've heard, they just say it helps them become a little less reactive and almost become the observer, because that's kind of what we're working toward, right, in our yoga practice, is working on breath work and just becoming the observer and trying not to attach yourself or identify with anything that happened in the past or anything that is, maybe something that you're tying to your identity. So like you said earlier, I love that you just used the word managing or coping. So it's definitely not like an end-all, be-all going to solve all your problems, but yoga does bring you into the present moment, and that's what we're working toward with our breath work and moving in and out of the postures, is just focusing on presence. So I think that's why it's beneficial to those populations and anyone, like you mentioned earlier, who suffers from PTSD.
And when you mentioned present, that just immediately made me think of meditation. And
yes,
and those are some of those key words that jump out when you think of present moment and mindful. Words like that just immediately make me think of meditation. How does meditation play a role in yoga practice?
Yes. So I like to start, honestly, all of my classes with a little bit of breath work, so anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes of meditation, and then I like to end my classes with reconnecting to the breath and looking at meditation. And I actually wrote my senior thesis on the link to meditation in chemotherapy. So when I was wrapping up my senior year at St. Mary's College of Maryland, I wanted to examine meditation and how it might aid with symptoms of mood and stress in the chemotherapy population. And what I found was that in the dimension of mood, depression, fatigue, tension, and vigor were significantly reduced with those who went through my meditation intervention. And then in terms of symptoms of stress, depression, anger, muscle tension, symptomatic arousal, neurological, gastrointestinal, and upper respiratory symptoms of stress were significantly decreased. But of course, I'm not the first person to prove that. There's so much research out there that supports that meditation not only has a significant health benefit in our psychological dimensions of our life, but also has so many physiological benefits to the body as well, because, especially here in the Eastern culture, we move at a very fast pace. And so it's so easy for stress to manifest physically in the body. We have tight shoulders. We sit at a desk all day. We have, like neck problems. We sit in cars for long commutes, stuff like that. So there's just so many benefits that meditation and yoga can do to both the mind and the body, which is why I would encourage anyone to try it.
Absolutely. I'm a testament to that myself. I don't necessarily practice yoga on a daily basis, but as a part of my daily workout, I do some active stretching that does include yoga poses, I'll say. So, and it may
I love that.
Yeah. It may only be, this is, I try to do the active stretching, usually before and after, but definitely not static stretches before the workout, but try to do some active stretching before the workout, but specifically after, when my muscles are nice and warm. And it does include quite a few yoga poses. And recently I almost never have, because I do meditate, and I almost never have like a stiff neck or anything like, I never really experienced that. But for some reason, a couple of weeks ago, I was going through something really, really stressful. It wasn't a bad stress, but it was like I had a deadline to meet, and it was tight. And
and you just felt it physically manifesting in the body.
Yes. Yes. I woke up one morning, and I didn't have the air conditioner on. It wasn't a super hot day, so I had the window open and not the air on. So that wasn't an excuse. And I said, I know exactly what it is. I said, I know it's the stress. And, it took a while for it to go away. And normally that kind of stiff neck would go away within, a couple of days. But this took over a week. And it just was, I tried to, continue to meditate and, just kind of massage and all that, just trying to relax. And no sooner than I pretty much finished, because I finished what I needed to do about 4 days before the deadline. And no sooner than I hit send and I was complete, the very next day I felt it was like I relaxed. Like my neck
Uh-huh.
started to heal immediately. It went from like a 8 in pain to a 1, right, overnight.
Mm-hmm.
So I can definitely say everything you're saying. I can back that up about the stress. It's no joke. It's definitely no joke. So, again, this is another one of these kind of macro questions, but explain to us the power of the present moment, because, again, it is powerful. And just in your words, and maybe a few words and maybe a longer answer, it's all good, but the power of being present, how is that beneficial to us?
I'm honestly going to just give a little shout out to one of my favorite authors, Eckhart Tolle. If anyone has ever read The Power of the Now, that book is amazing. And
it is.
Yeah, he just constantly reminds you just how nothing really physically exists outside of this present moment. Like, you can have memories of the past, you can look back fondly on the past, or you can have anxiety of the future and you can look forward to the future. But the only places that you and I currently exist right now, even doing this interview, it is right now. And that's a lot of what the yoga and the meditation practices now are honing in on and just repetitively teaching us, is just to exist and try and live in the now. And it's not easy. I mean, I'm human, you're human. It's so easy for even us in daily conversation, we could be thinking about, what am I going to eat for lunch? Or like even in yoga class, like, what am I going to make for dinner tonight? And it's so easy, but just my advice to anyone who is human and experiences that is just, whenever you realize, oh, I'm having anxiety about the future, I'm anxious about this coming up, or I can't stop ruminating on, something that happened in the past, is just pay attention to your breathing. Just kind of hone in on what your breath work is doing. And Danielle Byers, my mentor, all of you should look her up. She is amazing. She's incredible. She's been so inspirational to me in my journey. I'm just never going to forget one conversation that I had with her one day. She said, when we're breathing shallowly, we feel it in our chest. So even just maybe place a palm on your chest right now and just pay attention to where the breath is, and if you're breathing in and out of your chest. Because she said, when you're breathing deeply, you'll feel it in your belly. And you can even feel it when you take a deep breath. You send the breath all the way from the chest to the belly. So whenever you feel yourself maybe leaving the present moment, just take a big belly breath and then just bring yourself back into it.
That is very true. I just tried that. I read, and I'm saying I read, everyone can read it when they go to From Mat to Table, and this is just where I got some of my insights from about what you're into. The seasons. You mentioned the seasons and the moon. How do they play a role in, I don't want to say yoga, I just want to say everything. You're interested in that, so I want to know what's that interest?
The seasons and the moon. Well, Ayurveda medicine teaches us to eat with the seasons. So, especially here in the U.S., food is so plentifully available to us. And so everything is always, even though strawberries or mangoes or whatever, fruits or vegetables, we can go to the grocery store right now and get pretty much anything that we want. But what Ayurveda medicine is kind of teaching us is just eat with the seasons. So, in the summertime, eat the fresh fruit, eat the fresh berries. When winter rolls around, just kind of eat with whatever the ecosystem that you're currently living in is in season, just because it's good for your overall health and well-being. And then in terms of the moon, you can do a lot of reading on the cycles of the new moon and the full moon. I'm just really into it because it's a hard question to answer. I've just always kind of been interested in astrology. And so I just like to set intentions for every new moon or full moon and just kind of it's just kind of like a way that I keep myself on a calendar of being intentional with my time and energy, and then kind of putting down or picking up tasks that aren't serving me anymore, maybe focusing on something that I want to improve on in my life.
And does this go along with the lifestyle of yoga? I mean, I know you mentioned it is personal, but I know that yoga is more of a lifestyle than just an exercise. Some folks may think, oh, she mentioned stretching. Those are all physical things. It's a little bit of spiritual stuff with the meditation, but nevertheless, still people think of it as an exercise. But it is more of a lifestyle. Can you explain that lifestyle?
Sure, it's absolutely a lifestyle. And you will find people that are more extremely into it than not. Obviously, I think that if you go to India, you're going to get a different feel for how yoga is a lifestyle versus here, on the East Coast. I think that in terms of just making it a lifestyle, and I could just use an example from a conversation that I recently had with another yoga instructor, is she was saying, you'll realize your yoga practice when it starts to show up off your mat. So you'll kind of just realize that maybe you're less reactive in conversations with people that you don't want to interact with, but you have to because of, work, life, childcare, whatever. Or you'll even realize maybe you're being more gentle with yourself. And so for me, that's another big part of it, is I just feel like I do feel the benefits of my yoga practice happening in my everyday life more so than I do when I unroll my mat and say, okay, I'm going to do this class at this time, and it's going to start at this time, and it's going to end at this time. And then once I leave the yoga studio, that's it. Because it's really not. It is a lifestyle, and you will realize the more that you focus on your meditation, your breath work, and the more that you do practice the physical yoga, whatever that means to you, yoga classes in a studio, yoga classes by yourself, it doesn't really matter. You will realize that your practice starts to pop up in your life.
Because I think that the cool thing about that is that you're not doing something somewhere and then leaving it there. As sometimes things can get ritualistic that way, where you're just doing it and then you almost forget that you even did it because you just do it every Sunday. And it really starts to not have any meaning to it. But when it manifests itself, right, in other areas of your life, you know that you're in constant practice. And I think that's the power of the word practice, is that you're constantly, you've never actually mastered it, but the practice of it is, the pursuit of mastering it, which is awesome. I just have a couple more questions. Yeah, I just have a couple more. Well, I want to jump on the food side, which you actually already answered a couple of my questions about the seasonal eating, because we did an article about traditional Chinese medicine, and I actually was able to get Tom Brady's football player, Tom Brady, MVP, his chef. Got some, just some words from him and about how he feeds, the MVP. And the funny thing was, it was before this season, this past season when they won the Super Bowl. So it was before that. So the cool thing is it was, a couple weeks before that, and then they won. So it kind of backed up, hey, this is, the MVP's eating this
working,
way.
Yeah.
Right. So we talked a little bit about Chinese, traditional Chinese medicine and the seasonal eating, which you just explained. But we recently did an article a couple of weeks ago on superfoods. And the crazy thing is, I just learned during doing the article that the whole superfood thing is a marketing term. I didn't, you hear things and you just take them for, the way someone gave them to you.
Like kale craze, how everyone was making kale chips all at once.
Exactly. So many things move in and out. And in some ways, you have some, I don't think the superfood marketing thing is a bad thing, because it does kind of encourage, certain foods. But then you had a few, not too long ago, people were kind of condemning coconut oil. And then a lot of the really good nutritionists were like, hey, wait a minute, don't, that's not
Hey,
really
wait a minute,
true.
yeah, it's fat.
So I learned that was a marketing term. So can you give us your insight about this? And what are some of the foods, outside of what they consider super, what are some of the foods you would consider to be, quote unquote, super? Ones you just can't live without, right?
Sure. So I actually would encourage anyone to watch the movie Forks Over Knives. It's on Netflix if anyone has an account and is familiar with it. It was really educational and really informative. It talked a lot about meat-based protein versus plant-based protein. Personally, I am a pescatarian, so I don't eat meat, and so my diet kind of already does revolve around plant-based protein. But there are just so many little dietary changes that anyone can do that will significantly, give them a lot of overall health benefits and increase their well-being. Something as simple as switching over to whole wheat toast from white. White toast has a lot of sugar in it. Anything as simple as maybe if you can't take meat out of your diet entirely, maybe even just try to have one day a week where you substitute a protein like fish or tofu or beans or something like that instead of eating meat. To specifically answer your question, something I personally can't live without is kombucha. I love kombucha. You can find it in pretty much any grocery store. It's technically a probiotic drink. It's a carbonated drink, and it comes in so many different flavors. That is just, it's my ride or die. I'm always drinking kombucha.
Yeah, the fermented. Some people are like, "What is kombucha?" And just to explain, it is a fermented tea, correct?
Correct. Yep, exactly. And I've tried to make it myself, actually, and it's pretty easy to make. You just have to get a SCOBY, which is a symbiotic culture. It looks like a white pancake of bacteria, and in a way it kind of is. And what you do is you just put it in a big batch of tea. You can do any tea you like. I like to do black tea or oolong tea. And then, of course, the SCOBY, because it is a living thing, needs to eat. So you have to put in sugar. You can do whatever kind of sugar you want. I just do like raw organic sugar. And then over time, it usually takes like 2 weeks. It'll ferment and start to get like the bubbles in it, the carbonation. And then it's ready, and then you can drink it.
I was just going to ask.
Delicious.
It is delicious. I actually drink it too, and I got my uncle probably about 6 months ago. He's not very healthy, but he's he's an old. This is a completely different generation, and so I introduced him to kombucha. And the older, I hate to say it, but the older generation really, really loves Facebook for some reason. It's like their thing. And the next thing I knew, he went on Facebook and he had about 25 bottles. He had bought, I don't know how many cases that is or if that is a case, but he had all flavors. And he took a picture and put it on Facebook. And I'm like, wow, he's like crazy about it. Now he can't live without it. And some of the things that I'm telling him and encouraging him to do, he goes and tells his doctor, because his doctor is, regular Western doctor. She does it. Some of the things I don't even think she knew what kombucha was. But he told her about it, and so that's just one of the things. But I, introduced him to like black cumin seeds, and now he's making smoothies and putting black cumin seeds in. It's a lot of things that he's doing, but definitely kombucha is his thing now. So I'm really happy.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
I jumped over seasonal eating benefits. I don't know if we discussed the inflammation and just some of the things that seasonal eating. I don't want to jump over that. I mentioned it and then I kind of went over it. Are there some things that you can just kind of quickly, like, not even, it doesn't have to be quickly, but just some of the things you can mention are the benefits, because I don't want to leave that out. You can't just say eat seasonally and then not tell people why.
It's so, like, let's just take kale, for example. It's a leafy green vegetable. It's good for you in so many different ways, like more than we could talk about even on this podcast. But I guess I could just use one of the patients from the documentary Forks Over Knives. So he went on a 13-week plant-based diet. And so there was a doctor out in LA that met with him, and prior to meeting with him, he was on 9 medications. He had a variety of symptoms. He was overweight. He had high cholesterol. He wasn't sleeping very well, and over this 13-week period of time that the doctor in LA took him off all of his medications, went grocery shopping with him, meal prepped with him, taught him how to, read the labels, look at the ingredients. Less ingredients is better. Obviously, we're trying to avoid high fructose corn syrup or anything that has an artificial preservative in it or artificial dye, like yellow 5, for example. And over this 13-week time period, he lost weight. He was pretty much asymptomatic toward the end of it, and he wasn't taking any of the 9 medications that he was on prior to the intervention. So if that doesn't show you what a plant-based diet can do for you, I don't know what will.
Right. And that is, again, focusing on, and you can find it online. Of course, we covered it in one of our articles that we wrote up as far as just what's in season, because like you mentioned, you can go to Costco and get blueberries no matter what month it is, no matter what time of the year it is. But there is a benefit, as you mentioned, to eating what's in season. And I'll link up on with this, some of the things that you're talking about in the blog post that we do with this, back to one of our articles that like I said, we mentioned a little bit more in depth about specifically Chinese medicine, right? But that's a perfect example of, focusing more on, kind of getting more of those plants in there, focusing on what's in season. So thanks for that. One thing I do want to know before I let you go is what do you hope to accomplish personally and with your company?
Personally, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. I mean, I love teaching yoga. I hope that I live to be 100 and that I'm an old lady with long gray hair down to my butt. If I can't physically practice yoga at that age, I hope that I'm talking my students through the classes. I recently took a class with Dharma Mitra, if anyone knows about him or wants to look him up, and he just spoke through the class the entire time and just had one of his students demoing. So that's what I hope for me personally in my yoga career. And then with From Mat to Table, Carly and I have talked about it, and we're just going to do it as long as it's fun and as long as there's a need. We see that we're bringing people together, and that's what we're all about. We're all about gathering people from different backgrounds and, we're leading them through a yoga practice, giving them a really good meal, and just watching them connect and just find a way that they connect, even though they did, maybe somebody is a nurse practitioner, or maybe someone is a pharmaceutical rep, or maybe someone is a dog walker. We just want to see different people come together over the two things that we love most, food and yoga. And so we're just going to keep doing it as long as there's a demand. And that's what we love about it is, we do these events month to month, but if anybody wanted to do a private event, we've done that in the past, we'll go out to them and do a private event. So we're just doing it as long as it's fun, and that's what we're about.
Cool. And I think we mentioned these meals that she cooks. What kind of meals could we expect? What are some of the past meals, recipes that she's done?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, in October, we did a completely root vegetable meal. This past event in August, we did bowls. So I'm sure bowls are exploding over social media, as people have seen. So it was called Greens and Grains. And so we did like a quinoa, kale, bok choy, roasted snow peas, smoked Gouda, radishes, carrots, sprouts. We basically just made a huge spread of fresh fruits and vegetables, and then we just gave everyone a bowl and we let them create their own bowl because, we were like, well, we kind of try to stray away from plating people's food because we're also trying to be environmentally friendly and conservative, and we feel like when you plate food, you're more likely to waste food. And so if you come to an event, you're going to be taking as much or as little as what we have to offer. And that's what it's all about. If you don't want to eat something, you don't have to. And if you want more of something, we welcome you to come back for seconds.
That is smart. Didn't think about that. As opposed to create. Right. That makes sense. So where can we find you? What's the website? What's your social media handles?
Sure. So for From Mat to Table, you can find me at www.frommattotable.com or on Instagram at From Mat to Table. And then I have a yoga Facebook page. It's just Molly Malarkey's Yoga. Or if you want to connect with me on Instagram, you can find me at mollys.mat. Thank you so much for the opportunity to get to talk to you guys. I hope that you guys just continue to grow. I checked you guys out. I think what you're doing is awesome. It's amazing that in today's day and age, you could literally pick up the phone and have a doctor do a house visit.
Right. Come right to you. Part of the name, Doctors to You. All right. Thank you so much for taking this 45 minutes.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Cool. And have a great day.
Thank you. You too.